Some say there's a hidden book, not a myth, not a conspiracy, but a manuscript whispered about through centuries. A small black ledger that's quietly passed from merchant to monarch, banker to billionaire. Inside it, 4 unspoken laws that decide who commands fortune and who serves it. These laws aren't secrets because they're hidden. They're secrets because most people refuse to see them. For most of my life, I believed money was chaos. I thought it was a game of luck, timing, and talent. I thought if I worked hard enough, something would eventually break through. But the truth? Hard work doesn't guarantee wealth any more than movement guarantees progress. Some men hustle their entire lives and never escape the treadmill. Because money, like power, obeys structure. And once you understand that structure, the game shifts forever. That's what Machiavelli understood centuries ago. Fortune doesn't favor the brave. It favors the prepared. Wealth isn't random. It's built through invisible frameworks of psychology, power, and leverage. And when I finally grasped that, my entire life transformed. Within a few years, I went from broke to a millionaire by 30, not by working harder, but by aligning myself with the 4 timeless rules of wealth. The first rule, the foundation everything else rests upon, is simple but ruthless. You must possess one money-making skill, not luck, not inheritance. A skill, a blade sharp enough to cut through every economic storm. This skill becomes your weapon in the war of survival and dominance. Because in every empire, ancient or modern, the rulers weren't the hardest workers. They were the ones who mastered a craft so deeply that the world had to pay them for it. Machiavelli said, "Fortune favors the bold, but boldness without mastery is suicide." Now, there are 4 primary blades in the arsenal of wealth. Selling the art of persuasion, the ability to move men and markets with words. Making the craft of creating products, tangible or digital, that the world consumes. Designing the intuition to shape beauty, functionality, and experience. Hunting the discipline to spot mispriced opportunities before anyone else sees them. Choose one. That's your battlefield. Every man who tries to master all 4 dies in confusion, because focus isn't limitation, it's amplification. If you choose selling, your job is to master the psychology of influence. Understand that persuasion isn't manipulation, it's emotional resonance. It's learning how humans decide, what triggers their impulses, what biases steer their choices. The anchoring effect, the scarcity bias, social proof, these aren't marketing tricks. They're the operating system of the human mind. Once you learn how that system works, you can rewrite it. If you choose making, you're not building things, you're building leverage. Every product, every tool, every piece of code you ship is a form of time frozen into value. That's how builders compound. They turn 1 hour of creation into infinite replication. If you choose designing, you're mastering perception itself. Neuroscience shows that 90% of our judgments happen subconsciously within milliseconds. The brain's visual cortex filters reality before logic ever enters the room. That means design is more than beauty. It's the first handshake between emotion and trust. And if you choose hunting, you're training the rarest muscle in business, pattern recognition, the ability to see asymmetry places where perception hasn't caught up to reality. Every fortune built through investing, real estate, crypto, or startups comes down to this: seeing what others miss and acting before consensus catches up. Whatever you choose, go where that craft is worshipped. If you want to sell, surround yourself with sales killers. If you want to build, move to where builders gather. Proximity rewires your ambition through osmosis. And once you've found your field, study the top 1% until you can imitate their rhythm. Machiavelli warned that imitation without improvement is servitude, but imitation, followed by innovation, is sovereignty. During the day, execute. At night, study. That rhythm, action, and reflection is how mastery compounds. Every repetition carves deeper grooves into your neural circuitry, transforming skill into instinct. Psychologists call this myelination, the process where repeated effort literally coats neural pathways with insulation, making your reactions faster, smoother, unstoppable. Think of Mr. Beast, a modern-day maker who trained like a mercenary. As a teenager, he treated YouTube not as a hobby, but as a lab. Every day, he forced his brain to generate ideas until creativity became muscle memory. It took him over 100 failed videos to reach 10,000 subscribers. But failure wasn't wasted, it was data. Every flop trained his intuition, refined his calibration, sharpened his taste. Today, every upload reaches hundreds of millions. That's not talent, that's trained obsession. Or Warren Buffett, the ultimate hunter. For years, he devoured financial reports, page by page, hunting for undervalued opportunities. Out of thousands of companies, he made 12 major decisions that built his empire. 12 right calls over a lifetime. That's not luck. That's statistical inevitability, born of patience and pattern recognition. If you master one of these skills, wealth becomes inevitable. Master two, and you become untouchable. Steve Jobs fused design and persuasion. He didn't sell products. He sold belief. Elon Musk fused building and selling. He made the impossible, then convinced the world to fund it. You don't need to be world-class in either. You just need to be top 20% at two rare skills, because rarity compounds exponentially. A coder who understands marketing, a designer who understands business, a writer who understands psychology. These are the new royalty people who've learned to blend disciplines into asymmetric advantage. Machiavelli called this virtue cultivated excellence that bends fortune to your will. Skill is your virtue. But remember, skill without ownership is servitude. A prince who fights for another's throne is still just a soldier. Most people never escape servitude because they confuse motion with power. They learn a skill, they get hired, they climb a corporate ladder, and they mistake that for freedom. But the ladder is an escape, it's containment. Machiavelli warned that men forget the death of their fathers sooner than the loss of their inheritance. The same applies today. People will defend their salary more fiercely than their dreams. The moment you trade your time for a paycheck, you've sold your freedom for comfort, and comfort is the slowest form of captivity. A salary feels safe because it numbs fear, but it's a gilded cage, lined with golden bars of predictability. You're not free, you're domesticated. The world praises you for stability, but behind that applause hides dependency. You can lose your income, your identity, and your purpose, all with one manager's decision. Even the highest paid employees, the doctors, the lawyers, the consultants, are prisoners of hours. Their ceiling is time, and no matter how high the ceiling, it's still a ceiling. The rich don't sell time, they sell results, systems, and assets. They build machines that continue earning while they sleep. They replace effort with structure. That's the first transition from skill to ownership. Because if skill gives you the sword, ownership gives you the throne. The mistake most people make is believing that ownership begins when you're already rich. But that's a myth, one designed to keep you obedient. Ownership begins the moment you stop thinking like labor and start thinking like leverage. You don't need $1 million to own something. You need insight, initiative, and a system. The rich don't earn more, they control more. They build structures that multiply the effort of others, the attention of audiences, or the momentum of money. So, how do you seize ownership without wealth? Through the 3 C's: code, content, and capital. These are the modern empires of equity. Each represents a domain where a single individual can build leverage so massive it rivals nations. Let's start with code. Code is the new printing press. It turns intellect into infinite replication. A developer can spend 1 week building a product that sells forever. The energy you invest once becomes permanent automation, digital architecture that doesn't need rest, doesn't need permission, and doesn't ask for a raise. Think of a friend of mine who worked as a designer at an agency, earning $200,000 a year. It was a princely salary and still a golden leash. One day, he realized he was decorating other men's castles, so he quit. He spent months creating his own Shopify themes, digital designs that could be sold infinitely. He built once, sold thousands of times. That's equity. Now, he earns millions a year while living between Bali and Japan. That's not freedom from work, that's freedom through ownership. Content is the second kingdom persuasion multiplied by infinity. A man with a voice can move markets, not by shouting, but by engineering ideas that compound over time. Social psychology calls this the mere exposure effect. Familiarity breeds trust. When people repeatedly see your face, hear your ideas, or encounter your work, their brains start perceiving you as credible, even inevitable. That's why attention has become the new currency. It's not vanity, it's velocity. Look at Alex Hormozi. A few years ago, he was a gym owner, writing blog posts. Then, he started publishing content that dissected wealth creation, like a surgeon, with clarity, precision, and utility. Within a few years, he didn't just sell products, he sold belief. His new book shattered records, selling millions of copies in hours. No massive corporation, no ad spend, just a man, a camera, and a message engineered for impact. That's the power of content as equity. Each video, post, or idea is a seed planted in the collective mind. Attention compounds like capital. You release a message once, but it keeps working for you months, years later, across languages, across borders. That's invisible leverage. In Renaissance Florence, the Medici family commissioned frescoes to immortalize their power. Today's rulers commission attention. The new fresco is the feed. The new cathedral is your audience. Whoever commands attention commands capital. But there's a psychology to this too. Humans evolved as tribal creatures. We look to leaders for cues of safety and status. It's why influencers exist in the first place. When you consistently project clarity, competence, and conviction, people anchor to you. They seek your signal in the chaos, and in that moment, your voice becomes equity because belief is monetizable. The third kingdom is capital. Money is a weapon, not a reward. Most people use it defensively. They save it, protect it, hoard it. The rich use it offensively. They deploy it to multiply reach, time, and influence. Take my cousin. He hated his six-figure job, trapped in endless meetings and shallow goals. So he apprenticed under a real estate investor. For 2 years, he studied deal structures, shadowed negotiations, and doubled his mentor's workload. When he finally launched on his own, he didn't use his savings. He used other people's capital investors who trusted his insight. In a year, he acquired $40 million in multifamily properties. That's leverage. See, ownership isn't about resources. It's about resourcefulness. It's about understanding human incentives, knowing how to align people's desires with your vision. Neuroscience calls it dopaminergic anticipation. When people believe your plan will deliver reward, they attach to it emotionally. That's why good entrepreneurs don't raise money, they raise belief. The 3 C's, code, content, and capital, are simply different paths to the same outcome: independence. Each breaks the chain between your labor and your livelihood. Code is leverage through automation. Content is leverage through attention. Capital is leverage through systems of money. When you master one, you step out of servitude. When you master two, you become self-reinforcing. Remember this: the rich trade risk for time, the poor trade time for illusion. That's why even when they earn more, most stay trapped. They confuse predictability with progress. Machiavelli once wrote, "A prince must learn how not to be good and use it according to necessity." That doesn't mean deceit. It means refusing polite mediocrity. Society rewards conformity, not mastery. The polite employee dies unnoticed. The unapologetic builder changes history. You have to be willing to abandon safety. You have to build something others are too afraid to lose. That's the second rule of wealth. Ownership is freedom. But once you escape the chains of servitude, a subtler enemy appears: impatience. The illusion that if success doesn't arrive instantly, it isn't working. And this is where most men die, not in failure, but in frustration. Because the third law of wealth is time. Machiavelli compared fortune to nature, unpredictable, yet obedient to preparation. He said, "Fortune is a woman, and if you wish to master her, you must conquer her by force. But that force isn't aggression, it's persistence, discipline, the ability to act urgently but wait patiently. Most people plant seeds and then rip them from the soil when they don't sprout fast enough. They sabotage their own inevitability. They confuse motion with momentum, action with progress. Psychologists call this temporal discounting, our tendency to undervalue future rewards compared to immediate ones. It's the same bias that keeps people broke, addicted, or distracted. They crave short-term certainty more than long-term freedom. But those who master time, they flip the equation. They delay gratification not as sacrifice, but as strategy. Because time is the only ally that multiplies what you've already done. You can rush your labor, but you can't rush the harvest. Time moves at its own pace, but it always rewards those who plant correctly and protect patiently. That's why the impatient lose money. Even in bull markets, they can't sit still long enough for compounding to work its magic. Wealth doesn't grow in proportion to your ambition. It grows in proportion to your endurance. Once you've built a system, whether through code, content, or capital, your task is no longer reinvention. It's preservation. Consistency. The daily, often boring repetition that multiplies quietly in the background while others chase new distractions. This is what Machiavelli meant when he said, "A prince who builds on time builds on the strongest foundation." In modern terms, systems compound, distractions dilute. When I built my first business, I made every rookie mistake. I wanted exponential growth in a linear timeline. Every week that profits didn't double, I panicked. I rewired everything: new offers, new branding, new audiences. I was like a farmer digging up his field every week to check on the roots. Nothing could grow. Then I learned the truth. Compounding is invisible until it's irreversible. One day, I stopped changing direction. I focused on consistency, small optimizations instead of big overhauls. And within months, everything clicked. My revenue didn't rise suddenly. It accumulated silently, then surged. The same patterns I once thought were failures revealed themselves as the early signals of exponential growth. Time isn't the enemy. Impatience is. The modern philosopher, Naval Ravikant, said, "Be impatient with action, patient with results." That's not productivity advice, that's mental warfare. It means attacking the day with intensity, but surrendering your obsession with speed. It's the discipline of detachment. In neuroscience, this mindset is called temporal recalibration, the ability to align your emotional timeline with long-term payoff. Most people's dopamine systems are wired for immediacy. They need fast feedback, fast validation. But those who rewire their brains to derive satisfaction from the process, the daily grind, become unstoppable because their motivation is no longer fragile. When you operate like that, your timeline stretches further than your competitors' patience. You can outlast them without outworking them. That's how dynasties form, not from brilliance, but from endurance. Look at how cathedrals were built in Florence. The architects who laid the first stones knew they would never see the dome completed, yet they built anyway, because legacy compounds beyond the builder. That's wealth in its purest form, creating something that pays you back after you're gone. Patience is rare because it feels like surrender, but it's actually control in disguise. The world mistakes stillness for weakness, but stillness is the highest form of power. It means your foundation is strong enough to wait. The irony is, once you stop chasing speed, results arrive faster, because urgency without direction burns out, but patience with structure compounds. And this brings us to the psychological paradox that rules modern ambition. The faster you try to get rich, the longer it takes. Because impatience drives poor decisions, over-leverage, burnout, self-sabotage. The disciplined, on the other hand, understand that inevitability is slow. They know that the laws of compounding operate like gravity, invisible, universal, unstoppable. That's the third rule of wealth. Master time, or it will master you. But even once you've built your machine and learned to let it grow, there's one more force that determines how fast fortune finds you: proximity. Machiavelli advised young princes to live among their people, to see with their own eyes and hear with their own ears. In wealth, the same law applies. Environment dictates evolution. Your brain is a social organ. It calibrates itself based on the behaviors, ambitions, and norms around it. Psychologists call this social contagion. Success and failure spread through networks like viruses. If you surround yourself with mediocrity, you inherit its language, its excuses, its timelines. You'll begin to think small, act slow, and justify stagnation because everyone else does too. Mediocrity is contagious. But if you place yourself in an environment where excellence is the baseline, your entire nervous system upgrades to survive. You absorb ambition through osmosis. Your standards rise because you can't stand being the weakest link. That's not motivation, that's evolutionary pressure. That's why proximity to greatness accelerates growth. Not because you copy tactics, but because you internalize tempo. Fortune may be blind, but she tends to dwell where the bold gather. So move physically if you can, digitally if you must. If your ambition is technology, go where innovation breathes. Silicon Valley, Singapore, Dubai. If it's art or film, go where creativity is. Currency, Los Angeles, Seoul, Berlin. The geography isn't the point, the immersion is. The brain thrives on mirror neurons, cells that fire both when you act and when you observe someone else acting. This is why proximity matters so deeply. Your brain rehearses excellence before you consciously decide to emulate it. I once lived in a cramped apartment with 6 other entrepreneurs. It was chaos, broken furniture, midnight arguments, ramen-fueled brainstorming sessions. But the environment rewired me. I watched people twice as driven as I was pushed through nights without sleep. I saw them fail publicly and rise stronger the next day. That house was an incubator of relentless energy, the kind no classroom could ever replicate. Contrast that with most workplaces, where the loudest energy is complaint, where ambition is mocked as arrogance, and mediocrity is mistaken for stability. In such environments, your potential doesn't die overnight. It decays slowly, buried under routine. Machiavelli warned that there is no avoiding war. It can only be postponed to the advantage of others. If you don't fight your own complacency, you'll be conquered by someone else's hunger. You become the average of the 5 people you tolerate most. If your circle doesn't challenge your pace, you're in the wrong race. And if you can't yet afford to move cities, move your mind. The internet is full of rooms where excellence is the default. Online communities of builders, creators, thinkers, digital Florence for the modern age. Immerse yourself in their language. Let their momentum infect your neurons. When I was 25, I was building my first startup in Europe. I gave a talk at a local founder meetup, and people applauded. I should have felt proud. Instead, I felt a quiet panic. If I'm the smartest man in this room, I thought, I'm in the wrong room. A week later, I sold everything I owned and booked a one-way flight to San Francisco. No job, no home, no guarantees, just the certainty that I needed to stand where ambition burned hottest. That single decision compressed a decade of growth into 1 year. Because proximity doesn't just change your opportunities, it changes your identity. Let's tie everything together. 4 laws, 4 pillars that transform the chaos of money into a system of inevitability. The first is mastery. You must choose one money-making skill, selling, making, designing, or hunting, and devote yourself to its complete command. Because skill is the sword that cuts through every economic season. It is the antidote to luck. The world doesn't pay for effort, it pays for effectiveness. The second is ownership. Once you've sharpened your weapon, you must claim your territory. Without ownership, skill is servitude. You're a warrior fighting for another man's throne. Whether through code, content, or capital, you must own something that earns while you sleep. Ownership is how you stop trading hours for illusion. The third is time. You must learn to operate with urgent action and patient results. Because wealth doesn't bloom on command, it compounds. The impatient chase luck, the disciplined build inevitability. When you stop uprooting your progress for instant proof, the invisible gears of compounding begin to turn in your favor. And the fourth, the one that accelerates all the others, is proximity. Because even though success needs time, it grows faster when you stand in the fire of excellence. Surround yourself with the obsessed, the disciplined, the hungry. Their energy becomes your gravity. When these four principles align: skill, ownership, time, and proximity, failure stops being random. It becomes a choice. You can think of it like biology. Most people fail at fitness, not because the science is wrong, but because they break the consistency loop. They eat clean for a month, train for a few weeks, and then quit when results aren't instant. But if you eat clean, train daily, and sleep deeply for long enough, your transformation is inevitable. Wealth works the same way. If you practice the four laws long enough, you stack the odds of prosperity so heavily in your favor that luck becomes irrelevant. This is why Machiavelli's teachings still matter. He understood the psychology of power that fortune bends to structure, not emotion. He said, "The great man is he who can rule fortune by patience and audacity." That's what these four rules are: patience and audacity in sequence. Skill gives you the sword. Ownership gives you the castle. Time gives you the dynasty. Proximity gives you the army. Play this game long enough, and wealth stops being a dream. It becomes your inheritance. But there's something deeper than money hidden inside these laws, something that speaks to human nature itself. At the core, every rule is a psychological rebellion against comfort. Mastery demands humility, the willingness to be terrible before you are great. Ownership demands courage, the willingness to risk comfort for control. Patience demands faith, the willingness to act today for results you won't see tomorrow. And proximity demands vulnerability, the willingness to leave safe rooms and enter ones where you are the least impressive person there. These aren't just strategies, they are stages of transformation. Each one breaks a layer of psychological conditioning that society quietly installs. Social psychology calls this status quo bias, the mind's natural resistance to change, even when that change leads to improvement. The human brain is wired to conserve energy, and change burns calories. It feels unsafe. That's why mediocrity feels like safety. It's predictable. But safety is just a slower path to regret. Neuroscientists have found that discomfort activates the same regions of the brain responsible for learning and adaptation, the anterior cingulate cortex. That means discomfort isn't a signal to retreat. It's a biological green light for growth. The pain of progress and the pain of failure feel identical, only perspective separates them. When you begin applying the four laws, your brain will resist. It will invent stories: "I'm not ready, I don't have time, it's too risky." Those are just your neurons defending their old hierarchy. But if you persist through that initial resistance, your brain rewires. Dopamine starts attaching itself to challenge instead of comfort. That's how obsession forms, through consistent reward association with discomfort. Every empire, ancient or modern, was built by those who mastered discomfort. Florence, Athens, Silicon Valley, all were born from restless minds who couldn't tolerate stagnation. The pattern is timeless. Revolution always begins with dissatisfaction. So, the real game isn't about money, it's about self-sovereignty. Wealth is just the visible side effect of psychological independence. When you build skill, you take control of your value. When you build ownership, you take control of your time. When you master patience, you take control of your emotions. And when you choose proximity, you take control of your environment. That's the full circle internal mastery, reflected through external prosperity. But there's one final truth, the kind that separates those who dream from those who build. Every man wants freedom, but few are willing to lose their comfort to get it. Every generation believes it will beat the odds through hustle alone, but hustle without structure is just exhaustion with better branding. Structure beats speed, leverage beats labor, and patience beats panic. You don't need to predict the future, you need to design it. Brick by brick, year by year. Because here's the quiet irony. The moment you stop chasing wealth and start building structure, fortune stops running and starts orbiting you. There's a story I always return to when my patience falters. The comedian Steve Martin, who once decided to master the banjo. His teacher told him he had no natural talent. Most people would have quit. Steve didn't. He said, "I'll play for 40 years. I doubt a man who plays for 40 years can still be bad." Within a decade, he won Grammys for the very instrument he once failed at. That's the final lesson. Talent is a myth. Endurance is the truth. The world crowns those who build quietly and endure loudly. The rest confuse movement with momentum and die believing they were unlucky. So choose your weapon, build your castle, outlast your doubts, and stand close to those who burn as brightly as you want to. Because fortune doesn't favor the bold, she favors the disciplined.